Um, I'm just trying to decide if I'm comfortable even talking about that.
This One's Wife. The Queen's Anger at Twerk and Jerk. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. The late Queen Elizabeth II was a normal. This meant that she had emotional empathy. She had a mixture of both empathic and narcissistic traits. It also meant, as a normal, she would not be affected by emotional thinking to the same degree as, say, an empath would be when confronting, in particular, narcissists. The Queen will have met a lot of narcissists through her role as a head of state and a monarch. She may not necessarily have described them as such, but she will have become accustomed to dealing with certain personalities, and she will have recognized them. She will have perhaps seen them as difficult, challenging, self-absorbed. I'm sure the late Queen had her appropriate word to describe them. But what it also meant was that as a consequence of her position and her experience in dealing with these individuals, it meant that she would not suffer them for long. It meant that she would see through them. It meant that she would identify that the behaviours were problematic. And it was certainly the case when it came to this One's Wife, who, memorably, she described as evil. It's also the case that more information is now forthcoming, a number of years after the death of the Queen, about the anger that she felt for Harry and this One's Wife with regard to their behaviour. This information has been pooled by the Daily Beast that reports the late Queen Elizabeth II was extremely suspicious of this One's Wife and ended up being profoundly unhappy with Harry and this One's Wife after they wed. This was revealed by Sally Bedell-Smith in her Substack column, which I've mentioned previously, but this has then prompted other sources to deliver fresh accounts of their own understanding of the Queen's dismay at her once favoured grandson and his wife. One source, a former courtier, told the Daily Beast, ultimately the Queen felt betrayed by Harry, and when he and this One's Wife attacked the institution that she spent her whole life serving in the Oprah interview, that betrayal was complete. It was absolutely shocking to those of us that knew him that he would do that, not least because her husband was on his deathbed. The Oprah interview with Harry and this One's Wife was broadcast on March the 7th, 2021. Prince Philip died on April the 9th, 2021, 33 days later. In the interview, this One's Wife alleged that the royal family had expressed concerns about how dark her first child's skin would be when he was born. The allegation prompted a response from Buckingham Palace. While some recollections may vary, they are taken very seriously and will be addressed by the family privately. The former staffer told the royalist, the allegations of racism dismayed the Queen. To accuse an unidentified person within the family of racism, thereby casting the shadow of suspicion over everyone, was unforgivable in her eyes. That was what ultimately prompted her to issue the recollections may vary statement. Things were never the same after that. It was a horrific series of betrayals at the end of her life. Speaking to biographer Robert Hardman, one staffer said that the Queen was as angry as I'd ever seen her after Harry and this One's Wife publicly claimed that they consulted with the monarch before giving their daughter the Queen's nickname. They used her name Lilibet without her permission for their child, a source told the royalist. The Queen's team told the BBC the palace had not been asked for permission in advance. Another friend of the royals told the Daily Beast, you have to remember that the Queen was seriously ill for years with bone cancer. She knew she was dying. She could hardly see. She could hardly stand. She could hardly move. And then she was completely let down by her grandson and his wife. It was utterly devastating for her. A friend of Prince William and Catherine said, the family, of course, all blame this One's Wife 100%. as Sally Bedell-Smith's column made clear, he ain't the sharpest tool in the box, and they feel he was completely manipulated, and that this one's wife saw him and realised she could become the most famous person in the world. Then the reality of what their boring royal life would be like sunk in, and she decided to ruthlessly milk it for all it was worth. That is their view. The revelations by Bedell-Smith were based on interviews with the Queen's cousin, the late Lady Lisa Anson. Bedell-Smith said that just days before this one's wife and Harry's wedding, Anson told her, "We hope, but don't quite think she is in love. We think she engineered it all." The friend of William and Catherine added, "The family think it is a rerun of what happened with Wallis Simpson and Edward VIII, and the only solution is to follow the same playbook. Exile worked before, and it will work again." Interestingly, that the word exile has been used, as that might be a hint that supports the view that some have that this one's wife was effectively kicked out of the royal family, that the Megxit arrangement arose as a consequence of her being told, "You have to go." What it does show is that the Queen was betrayed and angered by the behaviour of both Harry and this one's wife. It once again demonstrates how this one's wife behaved with an absence of emotional empathy, placing her own needs ahead of anybody else's, and how she manipulated Harry, narcissist that she is, and how readily he was to be manipulated because, of course, he bought into the awful shared fantasy that she presented him with. His own unpleasant and narcissistic traits came to the fore, resulting in his reprehensible behaviour also. What is interesting is that these recollections and reports about the Queen's anger are being resurrected now. The events spoken of are between 2018 and 2021, some 4 to 7 years ago, and the Queen died nearly 3 years ago. Therefore, it presents the question, why are these matters being reported now? Why is it that certain people are coming forward to talk about how angry the Queen was? Well, it's certainly not something that is advantageous to this one's wife, because it reminds people of her unpleasant behaviours and therefore is a threat to her need for control. It furthermore demonstrates to many people who remain loyal to the late Queen that they were right to be suspicious about this one's wife, and paints her very much as a manipulative, unpleasant, dark character who has told lies and has smeared and upset a monarch who gave in excess of 70 years' service to her nation. It would appear that releasing this information now is being done as part of ensuring that the overtures that this one's wife and Harry occasionally make to try and offer that well-used olive branch towards the royal family do not work, to ensure that people are reminded of the behaviours so that they understand what a conniving and self-absorbed woman this one's wife is. She will, of course, regard it as smearing because of her victim mentality. She doesn't recognise that people are simply talking about a view that was formed of her based on her own behaviour. But the fact that the Queen's anger at this one's wife's behaviour a number of years ago is getting a fresh airing demonstrates that there are still plenty of people ready to talk about the behaviour of this one's wife, and one suspects that this is very much the tip of the iceberg, and in effect is a warning that is being given to this one's wife, which is, watch yourself. We know a whole lot more about you, and we're prepared to talk about you. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.